Every damn day.
Hey everyone, it's Jerry at the Fledge, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 61. And I've got my good friend Mujahid on the show today. I've been practicing your name because I keep wanting to say Heed, but Mujahid.
Right.
And we are going to talk about being a resident of Lansing from 1950 to 2022.
Right.
And all the things you've seen change.
Oh man.
All of them.
That takes forever.
So, how you been doing today?
Hey, pretty good. Pretty
Yeah.
good. That's change in weather affects your body periodically, and you just kind of go, okay, that's just how it is, and keep on trucking. So
Yeah, I need to get my back cracked.
yep.
That's how I feel today. So 1950,
Mhm.
that's when the journey started for you here in Lansing.
Yep.
You want to tell us about the 50s real quick?
Well, in 1950, I was born over across the street at Sparrow Hospital. And Dr. Harrison was the OBGYN, the general practitioner, et cetera, for the Black community at that time. There was only one African-American doctor in the city of Lansing, and it was Dr. Harrison.
And was it segregated like that?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Like legally, or it's just how people did it?
It's just how people did it. It was just, I won't say so much an interesting time, because as a kid, you don't know anything different. It is what it is. And so, you continue to do things and live your life under the circumstances that you find yourself in, so to speak. Like we lived over on Williams Street before, like 1216 Williams, and that was a community. I mean, everybody had fruit trees, they had gardens, the full Monty, and it was nice. I had a little tricycle with a windscreen on it. I can remember those times, and the neighborhood was flourishing. It was multi-ethnic. There were Syrian people in the community. There were Lebanese people in the community. We're all living side by side. And as time went on, I actually saw that change. It may not have been that aware of the change as the change was happening, but as I got older, looking back, I could see what was going on. And there was a definite change in the air, so to speak. I went to Main Street School, which was I started out at Lincoln Elementary, which was on MLK and Williams Street. And once we moved down on Olds Avenue off of Williams Street, then I started to attend Main Street School. And it was, back in those days, it was neighborhood schools. And so, you went to school with the kids that you grew up around, played with every day, that sort of thing. And, it was, looking back at it, and I'm probably seeing it through rose-colored glasses. Those were good times.
Yeah.
I wasn't an adult, so I didn't have the responsibilities of an adult. I didn't have to punch a clock. I would wake up every day and think about, what am I going to do? How am I going to play? That sort of thing. We lived with my great aunt and great uncle and my grandmother and great grandmother. All of us in the same house. And to me, it was a great time. They had gardens, they had fruit trees in the backyard. We would raid people's trees and that sort of thing as time went on. It was just a good
We were
time.
still doing that in the 70s too. That was so fun.
And you'd get your fill, cherries, plums, all of that stuff. And as I got older and became an adult, we kind of, at 496 came through, because my father and my sister and I, my grandmother and great grandmother moved off of Olds Avenue to Main Street. And that was, I want to say, in the late 50s, early 60s, and before 496 came through. And that was a good neighborhood.
Yeah. But GM bought up property then?
Not that at that point.
Oh,
The state of Michigan was buying up the property to put the
okay.
highway in.
Yeah.
And that's what moved us back down on Olds Avenue again. They bought our house, and my grandmother kept one house that my uncle had built in a lot next door and moved it over on Washtenaw. And my father and I and sister. And then around that time, I want to say this would have been 58. My father got remarried. And so we moved down on Olds Avenue so that we had our house to ourselves, and my grandmother, great aunt, and great grandmother stayed in the Main Street house until that was taken. And then everybody moved back on Olds Avenue. So, we were all generations living in one home again. That was a good time, though. It was a good time.
So then, so that's kind of the 50s, right?
Yep.
And then the 60s, I think it was at 63 when they started building 496.
Right.
So they were buying houses before then.
Yep.
The real estate division and their, what's that called when they can, eminent domain?
Yeah.
Is
If you
that
didn't want to move, that they would take over your property.
Yeah.
So that was, I can still remember us as kids playing in where they, dug out where they're going to put in the big sewers and stuff. And we were riding our bikes through them, and it was a big playground at that point.
Do you remember people thinking this isn't right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because most of the African-American community that was getting displaced, we called it Negro removal. And most of those individuals are pretty much buying homes in the subdivision out on the south side of town, which is now called Churchill Downs. And that's where they were getting displaced too, if they didn't take the money and just move out of the area. It was really a contentious time because, like I said, they destroyed a community. And I see now, looking backwards, that was kind of consistent nationally. Wherever there was a poor, we didn't know we were poor, but poor community and people of color, that's where the administrations, the people of power would come in and displace everybody with no real reason why this particular community, other than maybe the people in the African-American community didn't have access to those that they voted into office and didn't exercise that type of pressure to keep those out of those areas. They felt helpless or they weren't listened to at all. So no matter what you said, it was going to happen.
Yeah. And probably starting with a bit of redlining too.
Oh, definitely. Which goes on today.
Suppress the neighborhood in the first place.
Right, exactly. Redlining still goes on. The various realtors and realty companies may not show you homes in a specific area. There still may be covenants in areas around the city that, even though it's not spoken of, they just don't show them to you, so you don't know that they exist. And
it's still on the deed too,
Exactly.
right? The language that says that
That's
you
right.
can't sell to a black family or
Right.
whatever it says.
It said it on the deed where I moved out on the south end with my family. That was in '85. But they just didn't enforce it.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was really interesting.
So, I always think about that time, and my connection, if you don't mind me just saying for a little bit, is that the Norris Grocery was on Olds Avenue. And I envisioned the 496 project and what General Motors did, and I think BWL expanded a little bit there. I saw that as kind of the end of the neighborhood grocery store.
Right.
I always kind of associate it with that.
Yep.
And
neighborhood schools, for that matter.
Yeah, neighborhood schools. My mother went to Main Street too. I'm going to have to ask her. I can't remember how old anybody is right now, but she must be. Oh, you guys probably went there together.
We may have.
Yeah.
I have to look at some of the old pictures of the school.
Margot DeWeese.
Oh,
That was her name. Do you remember her from second grade? No, I'm just kidding. But anyways, what was happening to the neighborhood? I mean, and I'm talking about, I know it was destructive.
Right.
Like what were those impacts?
Well, people that you had grown up with would all of a sudden be gone. Their home would be gone because, especially with the expansion of General Motors, they would just tear the houses down and turn that area into a parking lot. And I can remember when Olds Avenue was a beautiful, even though GM would run their trucks down through there between the main plant and Fisher Body. There were just beautiful elm trees and that sort of thing covering the street. It looked like a giant green tunnel that you could run down through. People looked, when they sold their homes, to try to decide where they were going to go from there, because they were so established with their friends, their children's friends. Like you said, Bob's grocery store was right down the street. I just remember that fondly as a kid because, it was a quick trip, 2 blocks to go get some candy or something, And Bob seemed to be a pretty nice guy, really receptive to the people in the community. And, it was just nice to have a store like that in the area.
Yeah.
There was another store up on Main Street, across the street from Main Street School, called Myers. And Mr. and Mrs. Myers used to run that. Us kids, we'd run across the street before school and after school to get candy to come home with. Plus school, they would always have things that we needed, like paper, pencils, and that sort of thing for school. It was a serious, the area was a serious community. It was, I won't say it was a Black Wall Street because it was so diverse, but it was a viable and strong community that was just, with the expansion, and they call that progress, with the expansion of GM and the state, it seemed like wanton disregard just destroyed the areas. And, people just had to, as with anything else, when they talk about progress, you just have to see what the situation is, make adaptations, and move on.
Yeah. So we're covering the 60s, okay?
Yeah.
We also have the civil rights movement happening. What was that like in Lansing?
Lansing was kind of a hotbed, especially when it came to the integration of the schools. Mm-hmm. I can remember that a lot of European Americans really didn't want their kids going to school with African Americans.
Yeah.
And you started to see an exodus out of the city. When busing came in, that was also disruptive in terms of the communities, because you had community schools. Now, all of a sudden, I would go to Main Street or West Junior. See, we didn't even talk about West Junior.
Oh, yeah.
But by the time you get to Sexton, now our area, you would be going to Sexton. But with busing, the students that were at Sexton or would have gone to Sexton, like Magic Johnson and that sort of thing, were bused out to Everett.
Yeah. And
so there was a dynamic change in sports and everything else in that. But I remember hearing about buses being burned and that sort of thing right here in the city of Lansing. Historically, you get more of that. I guess you get more press like that happened in Boston and those areas, large population areas, but it happened right here in Lansing. Mm-hmm. I know growing up, if we're going to talk about race, sorry about that. That's my buddy Bruce. Talk about racism in the city of Lansing. My stepmother was European American. Okay. And in 1958, that was illegal. Interracial marriages were illegal in many states in the United States. And it was frowned upon right here in Lansing. And when he would go out on a date with my stepmother, the Lansing police would follow him home. And there were times where they would come to the house and try to get him to come outside on the porch. But my grandmother, his mother, wouldn't allow him to come out. And, he at that time, he was what? I want to say 28 years old. Yeah, he was actually 20 years older than me. So I was 8. And, your testosterone is going, and he was a man, but she was able to keep him in check. And I think that kept him from getting beat up by, LF or LPD and that sort of thing. But, it was pretty prevalent in Lansing. You couldn't go to East Lansing and be there, when the sun went down, because that's when you get stopped and harassed, and that you might even been taken to jail or beat up.
Yeah.
But I didn't experience that due to the fact that I kind of listened to what my parents and grandparents said. So I avoided a lot of things that other people, that happened to them, because, okay, they said, don't be there, I'm home. Jumping time, I can remember what Dad used to tell me, that there was nothing in the street but the sidewalk. So what was it? When I graduated, I was home at 2:00. And I can remember him waking up and, I'm coming in the house. He said, what are you doing home? I said, well, you told me there was nothing in the street but the sidewalk, and 2:00, I'm here, and he kind of went, and went back to bed, But that's how I did listen to my parents. And I think that kept me out of a lot of stuff.
So late 60s, early 70s, they desegregate the schools with busing, right? Lansing School District sues to stop it.
Right.
Right. And so they put a pause on it until 76, I think.
Right.
And that's the first year I got bused from Kendon on the south side to Riddle on the west side.
Yeah.
So I got to go to Riddle the first year.
Okay.
And I was super excited because we only had, I only had one black friend.
And that was a new school.
4th grade. And it was a brand new school, ramps, high tech, everything, sweet math class. I was really excited about all this.
And see, that was another part of the African-American community that was disrupted, because Kalamazoo Street, all of that area over there, Allegan, Ottawa, Kensington, or not Kensington,
Kingsley.
What was it?
The Kingsley Center, isn't it?
Yes, the Kingsley Center, but Kingsley Court.
Kingsley Court.
Right. That was a street over there that a lot of people lived on, and that sort of thing. My grandmother's house, remember I mentioned that they moved the house off of Main Street over on Washtenaw. Well, that was right across the street from where you went to school. 1976, I was married and had 2 kids.
I was not. I was in 5th grade, trying not to, I don't know, take the wrong path, I guess.
I know one thing that I forgot to mention about the 60s was that in the community, we talked about some of the racism that went on. There was a Pop Warner football team that was formed back then, and it was called Spags Falcons. And it was unheard of for a white store owner to sponsor a black team. And Spagnolo, who used to be down on the corner of St. Joe, and at that time it was called Logan Street, with his store, he and Dick Liscombe, the Petros brothers, they all got together. He bought us uniforms, all of that stuff. And we played, that was our first year. I believe it was 1961. And we took city. We beat all of the teams. But at the end, they wouldn't give us our trophies. They came up with all kind of excuses in terms of somebody was too old or that sort of thing. And no, we had to keep people's birth certificates on file every single game to prove that these kids, that we were of the correct age. Same thing with the baseball team. Gentleman on Olds Avenue, his name was Tommy Gossett. And he was a carpenter. And he formed our first black baseball team for the city at that age group. And again, even though we took city, they wouldn't give us the trophies. And so he made them himself. I still have my trophy. If I'd have thought about it, I'd have brought it. We were called the West Side Sluggers. And that was, to remember him, I remember seeing him years later and just thanking him for taking the time, to spend with us. and how that kept us out of a lot of trouble. Having that opportunity, to play these games, because back in those days, we weren't specialized in terms of one particular sport. We played every sport. It just, whatever the season change is the sport that we played. Yeah. And even back then, the city would go out and spray water on all of the parks. So there were ice skating rinks at all of the parks. And so we would be through the winter. We're playing pom-pom, hockey, all of this. And now it seems that the city, anytime they talk about budget crunches, they take things away from the kids.
Yep.
Excuse me.
Please do. I want to get into that subject, but I want to, while you're taking a drink of water, Stephen Alexander says, my mentor gives you some muscles in 100. And then Omar here is asking, where else have you lived or been to? But we'll come back to that in a second.
Okay.
Let's talk about what they're taking away from the kids and how that's been working out.
Oh, it has, excuse me. All of the schools back in when I was a kid, they always had park directors every summer. And so there were summer activities for the kids. I can remember waking up on Olds Avenue. And once the park opened, we were big horseshoe players. And you could hear the horseshoe pits. And you knew when you heard that the park was open, you got dressed, took care of whatever chores that you were supposed to take care of. Maybe you didn't, but then you headed up to Main Street or whatever park. But we used to have after school programs. Dick Letts used to go around doing programs on the West Side schools like Michigan Avenue, Lincoln, Main Street, and then we would have bombardment tournaments. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people dodgeball, for those that don't know what bombardment was.
They don't let you do it anymore in schools.
And we would have tournaments like that where we played hard. But there was a lot of community members that took time to spend with the kids. Mm-hmm. And you don't get that so much anymore. Especially when it comes to institutions like the school district that would, or the city of Lansing, I should say, that would pay young people to be mentors and park directors at all of the various schools around the city. And therefore we would play each other softball, but you had activities. Nobody was sitting around on screens, or just twiddling your thumbs during the summer and possibly getting into trouble. Because what do they say? Idle mind is the devil's workshop.
Yes, idle hands.
Yeah, idle hands. Yeah.
So my very first job when I was 11 or 12 years old, I remember they had to lie about my age for me to get this job. But I was one of the kids that would be there to unlock the door and get all the balls out or get all the horseshoes out or whatever. And that was at Kendon. Okay. And I knew that every school had that, because we'd go play them in basketball or baseball, or I'll go get my city yo-yo champ patch in a little bit. But there was always something to do. And then, even when I got bused to Riddle, I already knew all these kids already because of baseball or basketball or football or wrestling. And so we already knew each other. It wasn't like, I think the parents thought it was going to be some big race riot that happened, right?
But
the kids already knew, like you said in the beginning.
Right. And that's, it's the parents basically that I feel cause most of the problems with their own biases. Especially when it came to white flight, as they used to call it, because they didn't want their daughters going to school with young black men, that whole mystique.
That narrative. Yeah,
exactly. And so that, it's pretty much a self-fulfilling prophecy, when you act in that manner, instead of opening your mind to what positive possibilities there could be. I think back on those things and just sometimes I get upset, but then I'd say we're past that now. And then something else pops up these days, and I'm just going, geez, oh, Pete, can we ever learn?
We might have to fast forward through the 80s and 90s a little bit, or you and I will be here for a couple hours.
Well, in the late 60s, since you mentioned that, I was part of a project, the Lansing Project. There were several projects that MSU established to get inner city kids into the university environment. And I was fortunate enough to be one of those individuals to be able to go to MSU under the Lansing Project, which was a whole new, oh man, that was a whole new thing, I should say. Fortunately, with my family, I had several family members that were college graduates. My aunt was one of the first Black women to graduate from U of M with a teaching certificate or a teaching degree for special needs. But yet she couldn't get a job in the state of Michigan. She had to move to Florida in order to do her craft. My uncle, her brother, graduated from Michigan State after he had come back from the Army back in the late 50s. And so when they would come home, they would always take me to these places. But, you know, as a kid, yeah, this is nice, you know, that sort of thing, but never thinking. And I don't know why I never thought that I would be doing this myself. And I don't know if it was a societal thing, whether, you know, our situation as a family didn't lend itself to the possibility of continuing education after high school, that sort of thing. But once I got out there, it was oh, wow. It was like my mind just went, you know, and to see the possibilities. And it was kind of difficult to settle down into one thing because there's so many areas that I was interested in. But also, like you were saying, the civil rights. I can remember we took over as the Black Student Union, took over Wilson Hall because the university wasn't promoting the African-American employees that had long-term seniority. They would have some of these students that had no time, making them their supervisors and not, again, promoting them. So we shut Wilson Hall down for a weekend, I think it was, and negotiated with the university. Students couldn't eat there. They had to go someplace else, that sort of thing. We at one time took over the African Studies Center, which we later found out was a CIA hotbed.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. You know, we're kids. So we're out there, you know, we think we've done some tough stuff. We're in there copying papers and all of that stuff while there's guys in suits outside taking a picture of us as we come out, not knowing that this is going to put you in the red files, all of that stuff. But it was an awakening in terms of political action and getting a better understanding of actually what is impacting your life on a daily basis. And I still haven't recovered from that. I'm just, because of that awakening, I just.
Well, man, there's a million tangents we can go on in just that there. But I want to go back to one quick thing about, you know, maybe it was your family situation or whatever, where that didn't seem like a real opportunity.
Right.
Earlier we had talked about the Lansing School District and how they sorted us in the beginning, right? Here's the college kids and here's the General Motors employees. Yep. I mean, that's basically what it was.
I think about that, and my brother and I, younger brother, he's 17 years younger than me. We were cleaning out my dad's house. Okay. Dad passed away 6 years ago. So we just gotten around to cleaning out the basement. And Mom kept everything. She kept all of my grades and stuff from elementary school. And I was looking at those and I'm going, wait a minute. You know, you would get below grade level in terms of being able to read. That was 1 year. Now, next year, everything is above grade level. And then the following year would be below grade level. I mean, and my brother had to point it out to me. He said, you were being tracked. He said, I can see this here, the pattern of how you were being, you know, tracked here. And the more I got to thinking about it, I got mad. So I stopped looking at it, but I understood what was going on. Later in high school, even, I wanted to be in college prep to go on to college. But the counselor kept telling me that I was just going to be working at Oldsmobile. And so there's no reason for me to be in the college prep track. And my dad had to come up there for 3 days in a row to talk to that counselor for me to be able to get into that that type of educational process in high school. And I think back on that, and we really had to be on it with our children, because that same thing still goes on. There used to be a gifted and talented program in the city of Lansing, and my daughter qualified for gifted and talented. But what they did was, when she went to gifted and talented at another school to do the work over there, when she would come back to her main elementary school, her teacher would pile the work on that she missed going to this other class, which she wasn't supposed to do, which discouraged her so bad she wanted to step out of that program. And we were up at the school. My wife and I are pretty radical. And so,
well, let's get there.
Okay.
Because your mind, you start to see all of the different possibilities,
right,
and they become believable, right? Because you're doing it,
right.
And you want to talk about the fire department? You want to talk about Malcolm Little? You want to talk about both?
Yeah, we can talk about both.
Let's talk about both.
I had 2 kids. I worked security for the school district before I got on the fire department. And before I left there, I was a troubleshooter for security at the school district. Clarissa Young, she was the first woman captain on the Lansing Police Department, was my supervisor. And there was several transitions during that time, because I became Muslim also when I was working for the school district, but that's another story. Once I got onto the fire department, that was difficult because I had put in for the fire department 8 years before I had actually gotten hired. I blew out all the testing. And then when I came back to find out about my application, I think they had made a mistake and left it in the active file, because I still remember the HR person going, uh-oh. It was an exclamation. And so after that is when I got able to go in and do the other part of the testing, which is the physical agility testing and that sort of thing. And I passed all of that. Now, I know that sounds funny, but one of the aspects of the agility test was you had to run a mile in 6 minutes or under. Now, you think about that. Now, we're everyday people in 1978, and we're supposed to run a mile in 6 minutes. I can't remember what the world record for that was at that time, but I think it was somewhere around 4.5 minutes or something like that in a mile in the Olympics. And here we're supposed to do this to get on the fire department. I did it, and I thought I was going to puke my guts out. I was just, because you don't prep for the.
I used to hang out with those old firemen at Corey's, man. I don't think any of them could have ever run a 6 minute mile.
Not then, and then getting on the department, a lot of the firemen were the sons of previous firemen. So there was a lot of nepotism on the fire department.
Hopkins, Hopkins?
Yeah, Sam Hopkins. Yeah, he was
Sam.
he was the chief when I was in the fire marshal's division.
Yeah,
and
I wrestled with his son.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's. Oh man, I didn't even tell you about my dad. My dad was state champ 3 years in a row at Sexton.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and so, but that's another story.
All right, we're going to talk about that offline. We're going to come back anyways, because we're going to have a lot to cover here. I think.
But once I passed all of the testing, I was asking, waiting to get hired. And they finally told me that when I took the physical, that my vision wasn't good enough to get on the fire department. And I'm going, what? And so when I talked to the chief, I didn't get all up in the air or anything. I thanked him for the opportunity, to get on, to take these tests and that sort of thing. But I also pointed out to him, I said, I know for a fact that maybe the city should change their vision testing, because I know I can see better than a lot of the guys that are on the department right now. And I said, but thank you for the time and take care. And I went home, and they called me the next day and told me I was hired.
Nice.
And so,
Well, maybe nice.
right, that was
That's a dual-edged thing
exactly,
right there, right?
Exactly. And so for the next 16 years, I was on the fire department, 16, 18 years. And during that time, I had 13 knee surgeries and back surgery, because it wears on you. And I ended up coming out of the fire department on disability because I needed an artificial knee. Mm-hmm. And the city doctor said both my knees were shot. So it was hard, over time. I loved the job. Oh my gosh, I miss it. But the difficulty in getting on, I even talked about them giving me back seniority, since they, took all this time to hire me, and all of the people to get hired in that period of time when I was actually qualified to get hired. So that was interesting. And then the time in the department, that's a story too, because you're living with guys that are from Pewamo, Westphalia, all outlying.
That's all you need to say right there to me.
And things were said in the station, or when you're riding the ambulance, when they'll blurt out something and you have to check them right then, because it was pretty degrading at times. And sometimes I thought I was actually going to have to get physical out on the apparatus floor. But that's, I guess, life in the fire department. And there was only 7 African Americans on the fire department when I was there, out of 250. And I don't think it's that much better now.
Well, I don't want to bash anybody or go too deep into, but there's still lawsuits about racism in the fire department and other departments within the city.
Yep, it was going on. It was a lot of times pretty plain. And I'll just tell you this. One time I'm sitting in the station, and one of the lieutenants, I think it was Martin Luther King's birthday, and he said, "Oh, that's just another nigger." And I'm sitting there. And at that point, he walked back to sit at the table in the back, and I went back. I was right here. I was right there, whether or not I'm going to lose my job or I'm going to dust this guy right here. And all I could do was sit there for a minute, and he was facing forward, and I was sitting looking in his ear. I was probably closer than this, and trying to make a determination as to whether I'm just going to dust him right here or whether or not I need to keep this job and take care of my family. And I chose the latter, and thankfully so, because I was able to support my family, 5 kids. I got, but those are the types of choices you have to make in life. And sometimes they're hard, and that was hard because I was right there. I don't like myself to be reactionary, but then I think sometimes you need to be reactionary to emphasize a point, but you have to pick that very carefully.
It's a tough balance.
Oh,
I'm
man.
Sure. For everyone that thinks racism's so archaic and old, you're sitting here right with me right now, and we're only talking 30 years ago, right?
Yep.
When all of this is happening, and it
going
hasn't
on.
been flushed out of the culture in 30 years.
Well, we right here in the city of Lansing have a clan coven. We also have what are they? Now I can't even think of the name.
Those Proud Boys.
Yeah,
or
Proud
something?
Boys. They have an office downtown. These sorts of things are right here, right now.
Yeah. And
we just have to make sure that we conduct ourselves, and like I was talking to you earlier, be self-aware and be situationally aware.
Well, we can't skip Malcolm Little Gun Club.
Okay.
Right? We can't skip it. And I know we're running a little bit long, but I don't care if you're okay.
Yeah, I'm fine.
You're the founder. Right?
Yep.
Tell us something about that. And really what I want to talk about is, I think important to both you and I, is safety and gun safety.
Right.
Let's make sure we talk about getting that out there a little bit. We can come back and talk about whatever in the future here, but I think that's important for us right now.
Right. I founded the Malcolm Little Gun Club back in 2018. In 2018, with the purpose of pretty much at that time wanting to teach people in the African American community about gun safety, gun use, and self-defense. I ran into an organization called NAGA. I shouldn't say ran into it, but I became aware of an organization called NAGA, which was the National African American Gun Owners Association. It's a national organization founded in Atlanta, Georgia. And what NAGA does is it emphasizes the long history of firearms within the African American community. And a lot of people don't realize that we've had to keep firearms in our community, exercise our Second Amendment right, or attempt to do that, because there were a lot of laws and social stigmas around firearms throughout post-slavery. Well, during slavery and post-slavery when it came to African Americans. And so to bring that out, most of us at that time were using firearms for subsistence living, hunting, that sort of thing. But there were other avenues or other things that can be done. We see biathlons and stuff in the Olympics where firearms are used as for fun, basically, target shooting for fun. There are competitions called like IDPA, which is International Defensive Pistol Competitions, where people can win big money, but most people in the African American community don't know about these things. And so with that in mind, I founded the Malcolm Little chapter of NAGA. I chose the name Malcolm Little because you look around and you want to have somebody that represents freedom and justice for the African American community and promoting self-defense and self-realization. And a lot of people don't know who Malcolm Little was. And I said, that would be a good educational component also. And I was literally stunned at the number of people that don't know who Malcolm Little was. And for those that don't know who Malcolm Little was AKA Malcolm X, AKA El Hajj Malik El-Shabazz. And he grew up a lot of his life right here in the city of Lansing. He then, once his parents, his mother was sent to an insane asylum, his father was killed. We believe that he was killed by a white supremacist group in the Lansing area that put him on the railroad tracks after his death, and then tried to say that he had committed suicide. So the family was separated. And there were families, the McGuires are one family here in the city of Lansing that took in some of the children. I know Cyril McGuire, who was an employee at GM, was married to one of Malcolm's sisters. And there was another Filbert Little lived here in Lansing. And one of the teachers at the Lansing School District, she worked at Wood Creek Elementary School, Mrs. Little. She taught my children. But if we don't know our history, we don't know who these people are. And so that's why I took the name on. And with things that are going on, and what we try to do is teach people about safe use and proper use of firearms. Many of us have firearms in our homes. You have them there for self-defense, quote, self-defense, and they're in a drawer and you never take them out. You don't clean them. If you need them, you don't even know how to use them. And so what we wanted to do was promote that use and that practice of those firearms, but also safe. When I say safe use, how do you even unload it safely? How do you store it safely so that other people don't get a hold of it and injure themselves, like your children or somebody else's children? Those are the types of things that we teach. In 2001, the state of Michigan established the law that allowed the community to be able to get concealed pistol permits, and under the shall issue. Okay, and before that, it was up to these arbitrary gun boards, and most of them were centered like where I live out in Eaton County. I live right in Lansing, but it's Eaton County, so I'd have to go to Charlotte, which was a sundowner city.
I try not to go to Eaton County. Which part of Lansing's in Eaton County? I don't.
West of Waverly.
Is it?
West of Waverly is
Lansing.
Eaton County.
Yeah.
And I would have to go out to the gun board out there. I put in for it a number of times. Don't have any felonies. I've been on the up and up, never molested a child, that sort of thing. And they would use those things against you. Under federal law, you can't own a firearm if you have a felony anyway. But even if your record was clean, if you were African American, there was very few that were allowed to carry a concealed weapon. And so once shall issue was established in 2001, I think I was maybe one of the few first 5 in line to do the homework to get the CPL. And people always ask me, well, why did you do that? I said, because I could. And before that, I couldn't. And so to exercise my full Second Amendment right, and under the law in the state of Michigan, I believe it's Article 6 says that we have a right to bear arms for the security of the state and, quote, self-defense. And so as kids, we used to always say, well, I shouldn't say kids, but as teenagers, if somebody had a gun and we weren't legally able to carry them, we say we'd rather be caught with it than without it. And well, in this instance, we could go ahead and be law-abiding citizens and exercise our Second Amendment right by carrying a concealed weapon for self-defense. And I emphasize self-defense because in my mind, anybody that uses a firearm to injure somebody aggressively other than self-defense has a mental issue. And so it's a life safety and mental health issue involved there. And we want to make sure that people understand the law, know what their rights are, follow the law, and be responsible gun owners. And that's why I established Malcolm Little.
And I love your organization. I love your mission. I support it a ton, but I also imagine you get some backlash.
Oh yeah.
Right. Because it's, what do I want to say? Not just Black run, but Black members.
Right.
And the racism's still there.
Oh yeah.
And, I think of the kids I grew up with that were white that had the hunting rite of passage. Right. And the kids that, well, I never really had that.
Okay.
I went hunting once. I've never shot at anything in my life. And, we would go fishing by ourselves. We weren't going out with our parents and stuff like that. It wasn't a rite of passage. It was us trying to see if we could get bluegill out of one of these ponds or whatever.
Those big red horse suckers.
And so I think about, what disadvantages does that give the non-white community?
Well, basically, that one of the disadvantages is if you are attacked and your life is threatened, if you don't take advantage of your Second Amendment right, you can't really defend yourself, especially if that individual or individuals are armed. Ida B. Wells said that there should be a Winchester in the corner and it should be part of the family in every Black family's home. And now she saw people lynched, which we're actually seeing, but it's a different form of lynching in her lifetime. And I felt as a person that has that mentality that we should, by all means, be able to defend ourselves, which Malcolm used to say self-defense was a form of intelligence, not something that you should be ashamed of. And I'm still a firm believer of firearms in the home. When people say, well, what about the kids? I say, well, we teach our kids that the stove is hot and not to put bobby pins in the plug. Well, we can teach our children how to safely understand that this is a firearm and teach them how to use it properly and stay away from it. If somebody brings out a firearm that they go visit, you leave, that sort of thing. Or if push comes to shove, show them how to make that firearm safe, making sure that it's not loaded, but to treat every firearm as if it is loaded. that you never put your finger on the trigger. You always keep your finger off the trigger until you have your target and you know what's in front of it and what's behind it. If you drop it, don't try to catch it. These are just basic things that every child, every person should know when it comes to firearms. A lot of them say, well, firearms are dangerous, but if you put this gun on the table, it can't do anything to you. It's when the person picks it up and uses it. That's when it becomes something other than an inanimate object sitting on the table.
Yeah. I love what you're doing. I think it's so important. I know that I can't name all the kids that have accidentally been shot. And I know that there was a young one in the park recently, or within the last few years. This needs to be done, and I appreciate you doing it.
But it's the adults that need to be responsible for what they have. And that means knowing what you have and how to store it and make it so that nobody can hurt themselves if it's not being used, in a responsible way. If you're not at the range and you're at home, store it properly so that your children can't get it. I shouldn't say this, but I usually have at night, I have my firearm on my nightstand next to me, but I also have what's called a gun vault. And I keep it in the gun vault so that my grandkids, even though they've had gun safety, my grandson is 8 and my other one is 6. I have 6 grandkids actually, and all of them had gun safety training. But I keep that in the vault so that nobody can touch it and they understand what it is. Now, Mason tries to break the code, but he's not going to break the code. I know that.
So we should probably wrap up, and we'll probably have to come back to another show at some point, especially as you are doing more with Malcolm Little Gun Club and you might have classes and stuff. I want to make sure that we help push that out there.
There was one thing that I wanted to tell you about. I have to look at my phone to pull it up. But Malcolm Little is one of 4 NAGA chapters in the state of Michigan. There's Black Bottom in Detroit, and they're doing crack up stuff. They're doing gun safety in the schools and stuff down there.
Oh, nice.
Bedrock in Flint and Denmark Vesey in Grand Rapids. I just got to pull this up a second. Oops. Trying to do it too fast. You know who I am. I don't know why you don't. There we go. But Black Bottom is sponsoring a gun safety on Facebook tomorrow. And that's what I wanted to pull that up tomorrow night, as a matter of fact. And cancel that. There we go.
The Black Bottom Gun Club?
Yep. Didn't mean to do that. I just meant to. There we go. Read it. It's called Black to the Land and Apex Defense.
And that is
March 3rd at 7:30 p.m.
on Facebook.
Yep.
All right.
It's going to be basic handgun curriculum. And the webinar is going to teach you about basic, I can't log in on my phone. I don't put Facebook on my phone. So
that's all right. I'll look it up and put a link out there underneath the show.
And Crystal Miller is going to be doing something on Facebook, and it should be posted in the Malcolm Little Facebook page also for women, because there are more women in NAGA than there are men.
Are there?
Yeah. And women are starting to come around and understand that a PPO is just a piece of paper. And if they're having an abusive situation, they got to know how to be able to defend themselves and their children.
Well, PPO is almost impossible to get because you have to serve it yourself if you don't have the right money.
So that puts you at risk also.
Yeah.
So and there's a lot of instances where women find themselves in life-threatening situations. And they're coming to realize that and saying enough is enough. So
Love what you're doing.
well, thank you.
All right, we got to wrap up. What's something that people could do to help with just the safety of our community? Something simple.
Just from a physical standpoint, I would say that people have to be more situationally aware. These days where you have active shooters and so much crime going on in the communities, be aware of what's going on around you as you move through the community. I tell people to have your head on a swivel and recognize situations that may put you at risk. And if you do that, you put other people and predators on notice that you see them, and they're least likely to attack you, basically. As I tell my kids, if you walk like a sheep, the wolves will eat you. But if you walk like a lion, they have a tendency to stay away from you. And so you have to just conduct yourself in that manner, and then get some training. Get training in self-defense, because these days we have to watch out for ourselves and our neighbors. And once we start doing that again, you'll see a drastic change.
Great advice. Thank you so much for the work you're doing in the community, the work that you've been doing for 72 years, it feels like. But I've known you've had quite some accomplishments, and I really appreciate you sharing and giving me some touch points.
Well,
and
thank you for having
filling
me.
in some holes for me. So it's an honor to know you.
Nice knowing you also.
All right, everyone. We love you lots, and we will see you tomorrow on another episode of Every Damn Day.